Salut survivors! Welcome back to SolutOdka channel in Going Medieval Guide series. In this video, I have compiled 30 tips that are here not only to help you gain more insight to the game, but also hopefully bring your gameplay and enjoyment to the next level. The tips are equally useful to newbies to help you get started with the game, as well as seasoned players that might pick up some tricks here and there. Now, let's go straight to the video. Tip number 1. First and foremost, when you create your game and select your first villagers, you need to be aware that unlocking several abilities in the game is actually based on the skill levels of your villagers. As a result of this game mechanic, there are numerous thresholds during a gameplay, but my first tip is to recommend trying to have a starting team with the following requirements. 1 or more villager with marksman level of 10. This will be very handy in terms of fighting, because with this character skill level, you will be able to equip and thus shoot arrows at enemies with a deadly longbow, rather than with a basic short bow. Then, also, 1 villager with a construction level close to 15, so that this villager will be able to rapidly construct stick traps that require level 15. Or also a research bench, which requires a level 10. Tip number 2. Early game, you will need to harvest wild redcurrant berries. Initially, this is for eating early on, then soon after, for producing wine. However, the plants go through different stages of development, and the ideal harvest time is when they are at the ripe stage. With this in mind, instead of tediously looking which plant is ripe and which one is not so that you can harvest the right one, my tip is to create a field of red currant at that location. Then select the Don't Seed option for the field. This way, your villager assigned to perform harvesting will simply automatically harvest the field when this is ripe. Quite handy in my opinion. Tip number 3. In this game, it is crucial to specialize your villagers to a task. In order to do so, you need to carefully utilize your job planner tool. You should look at it this way. Have for each task, in columns, 1 villager that has this job as one of his higher priorities. And have for each villager, in the lines, 2 or 3 higher priority jobs. Defining this way your higher priorities with levels 2 and 3, all other jobs to be low-level priorities with level 4 and 5, except some tasks like convalencing, for example. Then, reserve priority level 1 for emergency situations. Tip number 4. It is not very obvious at first, but there is a way to define rooms, such as bedroom, kitchen, library, and so on and so forth. These are really easy to define and give you good bonuses as a result. I therefore recommend paying attention to this possibility and implementing it as you see fit in your castle design. In order to do so, you need to turn on the rooms overlay at the top left of the screen. Then, you can hover each of the room types and read the requirements in the description. Typically, you will need some wall decorations to do so. These will be progressively unlocked over 2 technologies: furnitures followed by decorative structures. Once done, your colony will be eligible for bonuses such as the following. You will gain plus 20% cooking speed in your kitchen, or plus 20% research speed in your library, or a mood boost for people to sleep in shared bedrooms, or even better, in their own bedroom. The list goes on and on. With all these bonuses up for grabs, it would be highly beneficial to implement this tip early on. Tip number 5. Your people will have mood indications, depending on how they are feeling at the time. However, let's just say that some moods are more than meet the eye. When going through the mood of your people, you will often read very thirsty or something to that effect. Let me tell you, they do not need water. In fact, they actually crave alcohol, booze, a brewed beverage. You get it. A good glass of wine, right? So, to address this different kind of thirst, you will need to produce alcohol of some kind. Worry not, as I have some good news coming your way. You can actually relatively easily produce rough wine from Redcurrant very early in the game. Thirst problem solved. Then, later on, you can produce beer and ale from barley and herbs harvested from your farms. More solutions for more thirst. However, I would recommend utilizing the Manage tab at the top left of your screen so you can control when they are allowed or not to drink the thirst-quenching booze. This way, you reserve these drinks to give to your people when there will be an actual need to gain a mood boost. This can prove to be quite handy when going through dark times as a colony. There are other simple ways to increase villagers' mood, even in an early game. One of them is by constructing a backgammon table, which gives an entertainment mood buff. Another is to make an oak brethren and restitutionist shrines, which provides religious mood buff. Tip number 6. Trading exists in the game. And while obviously later, in the course of your village development, you will have lots of valuable items to sell, we cannot say the same is true for early game. Also, it is not easy to find a good balance to identify worthwhile items to trade. It is quite baffling to favor items for trading between items that have high value but require more work to obtain. Or would it be items that are seemingly easier to obtain but trades at a lower value? Which one will it be? One or the other? That is the question. I would therefore recommend for you to consider, during the early game and only in order to buy the high necessity items, to sell freshly hunted deer carcass for its very good value. Second to it will be to exchange a few chronicles. That is, if you have a villager with a good skill in intelligence who could take charge of this. Thirdly, you can trade crafted items as long as these are of good quality and require simple ingredients such as wood or hay. Otherwise, you can trade bulk raw materials as well, as long as these are obtained relatively close to your village. There you go, go forth and go trade, my friend. Tip number 7. If you have purchased some apple saplings, you need to know you should plant them in spaces in between them, since there is a probability during the growth stages of any tree, including apple trees, to have a natural growth of another tree adjacent to it. This way, you will get free apple saplings. Tip number 8. For your animal husbandry, you can feed them with hay or with animal feed. Animal feed provides higher efficiency in nutritional value. However, your animals can just eat simple hay, not requiring processing time by your cook. As you progress in the game, you might at some point need to limit the growth of your animals, if you want to control your hay consumption during winter season, for example. To address this, I would recommend controlling the pen sizes of your animals in order to control the population that the pen can handle. You see, each animal uses corresponding squares from the game grid. Chicken, rabbit, rats are using 1 square. Cows, deers, boars are using 4 squares, and other animals are using 2 squares. To illustrate this, for example, a pen width of 4, length of 7, I will have an area of 28 squares. Therefore, when I reach 14 goats, given that goats use 2 squares pair, the goat reproduction decreases drastically, being that the area does not allocate for more goats as per the definition, thus keeping the hay consumption in general under control. You can then slowly increase the pen size or change the animals to go to another larger pen, depending on which you want to go with the populations of the animals. On my end, I like chicken for the eggs, goats for the milk, and cows to carry a lot of stuff for trading and also produce milk. Please share in the comments what animals you find the most useful. Tip number 9. In this game, the way on how the research system works is very innovative. In fact, you have some people with a research skill to do some discoveries at a research workbench. However, instead of the game directly granting you a certain technology after some time, actually, you researchers effectively write books, which in turn allows you to unlock new technologies. Knowing this, it is highly important to note that when you unlock a technology, your books are not being consumed. Quite naturally, after some time, you will literally end up having an extensive collection of books in your library for your colony. This implies that you need to be careful not to lose some of your books, or you will need to rewrite these books once again. For example, if your books are not properly stored, they will decompose. You will lose the books, so proper storage is imperative. This leads us straight to tip number 10. Tip number 10. In this game, almost every item has durability and will decompose over time, even if you're not using it. For your stored items, the first thing is to build a roof above the items, of course. You also need to build a proper floor underneath, so that it is protected from above, but also from the ground. This is applicable to almost every item in the game. However, in regards to perishable goods, such as food, there is an additional factor to consider, and that is the temperature. In order to control the temperature of a room, besides working on the insulation of the floor, the ceiling, and the walls, you will be able to build braziers and torches to increase the heat generated inside the room, and you will be able to include windows in the walls to be able to reduce the temperature. Then, you can double-click on one window or a brazier, for example, and this will select all of these kind in your field of view, for you to control multiple of these at the same time. Tip number 11. Early on, the seasons will be having an important impact on your village. During summer, this will be very hot, particularly when heat waves will strike your village. 2 early game easy ways to counteract this, beside opening windows to cool down rooms, is to craft straw hats for your villagers at a tailoring station, or to modify the shift of your people to work at night. Tip number 12. Similarly, during winter seasons, besides utilizing braziers to warm up the buildings, another option is to craft winter clothing and caps at a tailoring station. Another simple yet very good option is to work on the underground layers of your map, digging and building rooms, since when you're underground you suffer much less from the temperature due to the high insulation properties of the soil. Very useful information, if you ask me. Tip number 13. This leads us on the more long-term preservation of the food. I would recommend to simply build an underground room to act as a cellar for your food, utilizing the insulation properties of the soil. It is good to be at least 2 levels below the ground level, and if you are in a rocky area, you then need to unlock terraforming technology to be able to build your own soil walls inside your underground cellar. Tip number 14. Talking about food, there is something very crucial. Is in that you can edit a large majority of the ingredients of your recipes at various crafting stations. So, taking the example of the food, I highly recommend that you edit your recipes for your cook to use only the raw materials you allow to be used for preparing meals. For example, to forbid using redcurrant berries, so that you reserve these to ferment them into rough wine instead. Tip number 15. The structural integrity in this game works with the mechanics of stability, meaning that any block will have a stability value. The maximum is 4, and when it reaches 0, this collapses. You will therefore need to be careful on this during your constructions, your digging operations, and so on and so forth. And here comes the trick. When you will be ongoing with improvements of your walls, for example, from wood walls to clay brick walls, if you do not do any trick, removing the wooden walls will result in having the roof stability to reach 0 and collapse. Therefore, the trick is to build first a flooring on top of the wooden walls to be demolished, in such a way that these floors will extend stability even when you deconstruct some walls underneath, permitting to maintain your roof during your deconstruction of old walls and construction of new sturdier walls. We are halfway through the 30 tips already. So here is a good time to remind you that if you have found any of the previous tips already useful, remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video so that YouTube algorithm promotes it and shares it to other people who will also benefit from it. Tip number 16. Let's turn our attention now to defenses. When raids occur, it is critical to know that the main priority target of the raiders will be your villagers and their actual location. Therefore, when you are under a raid, you should position your villagers in such a way that the raiders will have only a single path to reach your villagers. Along this dedicated path, you can then plan to have a killing corridor area, where the raiders will be slowed down via traps as your archers shoot at them, and you can also add those to slow them down even further. To be noted is that this killing corridor with traps is also useful for wolves. How so, you ask? Well, you can keep your doors open to a food supply. The wolves will be attracted and will be damaged by the stick traps. Then you can enjoy the new supply of meat, courtesy of the wolves who will have fallen into the traps. Tip number 17. When your archers are on a higher elevation than their targets, the range they will be shooting at will be higher. Therefore, plan for an elevated tower for your archery to stand on. Take advantage of a defense in an elevated position. Rain down arrows on your enemies, drive them away, and defend your village so that you can live yet another day. Tip number 18. Still on castle defenses planning. If you have outdoor workbenches, the raiders will also be inclined to target these. Therefore, you can use these to your advantage to bait them for a short while. More importantly is that you should consider forcing them to go to your main single entrance with a killing corridor. While early on you can easily build the palisade walls to do this, you should consider later to build a moat for a guaranteed result and a more castle-inspired style. Lastly, on this entrance design, using sticks fences to create a path for the raiders is great, as it is cheap and this does not provide cover for them. You can once again combine it with traps. To be noted is that this raiders defense technique, once again, is also very effective against wolves. Once you will have your own tame animals roaming around, you need to ensure to have these stick traps in a zigzag shape if you don't want to see your own dogs fall into these traps. It happened to me and it was quite sad to lose my own trained dogs. Will you utilize sticks fences maze? Let us know in the comments. Also, if you have other defensive strategies to share, please feel free to do so everyone can benefit from it. Tip number 19. As explained in an earlier tip, your villagers will need to be marksman level 10 minimum to be allowed to utilize long bows. Otherwise, they will be limited to short bows only. And that is until the time you will have researched the crossbow technology and be able to craft these, which requires to be able to craft mechanical components with a level 20 in smithing and level 20 in carpentry for crafting the crossbows themselves. This is a turning point in your defenses, since everyone will be able to perform decently at range, even without any marksman skill. Tip number 20. A very important part of going medieval is about resources management and production chains. Therefore, reducing the travel time for these resources in all the production chains will have a great impact on your castle overall efficiency. There are several ways on how to influence on this. 1. Try to have storage areas of the materials needed close to their points of consumption, such as ores close to the smelters, clay close to the bricks furnace, food close to the kitchen, seeds close to your fields, and so on and so forth. You got the point, right? 2. For your main pathways in your castle, build pathways with improved traveling speed. The default one is 85%, while the wood floors provide 100%. and the best is with clay bricks or limestone bricks flows with 110%. Therefore, try to use these clay bricks or limestone bricks for your main pathways to save a lot of time for all your villagers every single travel, every single day. Thirdly, a general thing you can do to improve general travel efficiency is to keep doors open, since it takes quite some time to open these doors. Of course, this might depend on the season, as well as the risk of having roaming wolves entering your village, so you need to pay attention on how you implement this one. Tip number 21. Thanks to animal husbandry, after you have either purchased or tamed animals, you can then train them to carry things for you. This works in a similar fashion as a game called RimWorld. The key tip here is that if you have trained, for example, your dogs already, their puppies will also be trained automatically upon their birth. And on day 1, they will start carrying stuff for you. I mean it, that's brilliant, really good puppies. Tip number 22. Your inventory will quickly fill up when you beat the raiders' attacks, since you will get their weapons, clothing, and armors. For this, you should include in your workstations to forever dismantle low-quality items by editing the settings for this task. At the same time, this will also permit to level up your tailoring, smithing, or carpentry skills for your selected crafting villagers. Tip number 23. About the skills of your citizens. It is important to know that if low-skilled worker carries out a task of crafting, it is very likely that the crafted item will be of poor quality. However, when it comes to some skills like cooking, this will neither make the food of poor quality, nor make your villagers sick by eating these. This will only result in longer preparation time and generate less quantity of food. The same applies for construction. The poorly skilled worker will be slower and will maybe fail the construction. However, 100% of the materials will be refunded upon failure. And this way, your cooking and construction skills will still be growing at an affordable cost. Tip number 24. You will have some opportunities to have new people to come join your village. And maybe sometimes they will not be apparently very useful. But I will recommend to always accept them to your village, since they can still be useful and always contribute to your village. For example, in the worst case, they could still be hauling items. Hauling is a task that is not to be underestimated. You have hauling needs left and right, so haulers are always welcome, in my opinion. Tip number 25. For you villagers that you want to train in melee combat, there is a trick. You should equip 2 villagers with heavy armor and some poor quality wooden weapons. Then, you can bring them to a training ground and make them fight each other, increasing their melee combat as they train away. You need to be careful and stop on time, of course, right? And go to bed to rest and heal with the help of your doctor. Tip number 26. By default, your villagers sleep at night and work during daytime. As mentioned in a previous tip, you can exchange this setting during summer to use a cooler night to go outside if necessary. But you should also consider having this maybe day shift and a night shift nonetheless, since it will permit to always have someone on the job and keep production generally more efficient. Tip number 27. Once you will start smithing in your castle, I highly recommend skipping the smithing with iron ingots and going straight to crafting with steel ingots. You just need a bit more technology and coal to do so for a much better crafted item. Take up and reap the reward. Tip number 28. About farming. One difficult aspect early on will be the seeds, or the lack thereof. The tip is, There will be wild plants that you can harvest and therefore obtain seeds from them. So, you need to look on the map to find these sweet barleys and herbs and harvest them once ripe. You will then be able to replant these the following year in your own field. Tip number 29. Another tip for farming is that for multiple vegetables, such as cabbages for example, you can set as a field parameter when your villagers will harvest the crops. So, in order to balance between growing your pool of seeds and generating a food source, the solution I think is, instead of having one big field for the crop, have two separate fields, one for each setting. This will require less micromanaging and also reduce risks. Tip number 30. Wood appears at first like a plentiful resource. However, you will rapidly realize that you will deforest your map extremely fast. What with the amount of wood you need to run your castle production chains? Therefore, a simple yet very effective tip is to place within your compound a man-made forest and set on harvest trees once mature. Your villagers will automatically chop and reseed at the right times. Also, new trees will naturally grow for free around the said man-made forest. This colony survival game is fantastic. Already in early access and based on the roadmap, we still have a lot to expect to be added in the coming updates. I tried to compile these 30 tips, but there are for sure others I might have overlooked. So do not hesitate to share down below for everyone to benefit from it. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you all for all the subscribers already. I appreciate you being part of this channel as we grow together. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video. Cheers!